If I do not have it, I call on it. So, serious subject, de-escalation. The presentation we have for you this morning is geared towards a 3-hour presentation. We're going to compress it to fit in the time frame of an hour plus here today. So the first 19 slides I'm going to blow through pretty quickly because those address the underlying root causes driving behavior that you have to deal with in one form or another. We're going to focus on steps, procedures, protocols, and effective techniques that are proven worthwhile in de-escalating hostile or potentially hostile situations. Welcome to It Can Never Happen Here, because it does. No organization is immune. However, one of the things we highly recommend, and this is part of our behavioral awareness and analysis seminar, is develop a behavioral baseline of the clientele, the guests that come to your facilities. Now you may ask, how is that possible? Because there's such a turnover. If you pay attention to the typical demeanor of someone coming through the door or visiting your establishment, you will identify the type of behavior to expect from anyone coming through the door. If there's a deviation in that behavior, where they're more subdued or looking depressed or looking agitated coming through the door, those are individuals you're going to want to pay a little closer attention to, because those are the ones who just might be the problem that you're going to need to deal with. Okay? Behavioral triggers. There's so many triggers for people who just want to be a royal pain in the ass. It could be biological, sociological, psychological, cultural. I served in the Navy. I spent time in the Middle East and Central Asia, and it's unique to interact with the different cultures, and I'm sure you deal with that extensively here in Philadelphia. Dealing with the Muslim population, when you're having a conversation, they like to get into your face. Well, it's not aggressive behavior, it's just part of their culture. Emotions drive behavior, positive or negative. It could be environmental, home, school, work, the city, the neighborhood. Human desires and needs drives a lot of this as well, because aberrant adults, negative behavioral aspects usually drive an individual to pursue things they want in a less than appropriate way to do so. Quick example from a group of middle school teachers I conducted a program for last year. One of the teachers approached me about a student and said, I have this student in my class, middle school. Every day he's disruptive. Every day he's argumentative. Every day he gives me a headache. Okay. Did you ever ask him what he needs or wants? Now, sometimes it's just the typical behavior of an individual. But many times, they're looking for something. And the environment they live in is such that the only way they get what they need or want is through negative behavior. So the teacher had a conversation with him, and it turned out all he wanted was to move his desk to the window. He was against an inside wall. She moved his desk to the window, and the problem went away. She called me a few days later to tell me she couldn't believe that that was that easy. Well, in that case, it was. But that gets down to human emotion and needs. You may have someone who comes through your door that's looking to take advantage of you, create an incident for their own benefit due to human desires and needs. Could be chemical. Anybody who is on medication and overdoses, who takes the wrong medication, or are trustees of modern chemistry, yeah, you're going to have problems with them. Biological influences, diabetes, psychosis, all contribute. Social learning, family, friends, school, neighborhood, all contributes to how an individual behaves. Concept of collectivism, Individualism, lack of morality, the list goes on. Like I said, these are slides we're going through quickly because I want to get to the meat of today's program as to what to do when you're dealing with that royal pain in the ass, put it bluntly. Psychological issues cover a very broad spectrum. Cultural. I'm sure you deal with this frequently. And the more you can learn about the cultures that are patronizing your businesses, the easier it's going to be for you to interact with them. You know, my stint in the Navy allowed me to cover a lot of geographic territory, from Mediterranean through Central Asia, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and I learned a lot about cultural behaviors, physiological influences, heart rate and blood pressure. Now this is a key point. When you have that client, that customer who's having their hissy fit, that has become agitated and aggravated, their heart rate level will determine whether or not you'll be able to interact with them. Now, you're not going to know what their heart rate level is. But to give you a perspective, at 115 beats per minute, unless you're a highly trained athlete or professional, your fine motor skills shut off. Not a big deal. Okay? You have to start working on gross motor skills. Fast forwarding a little bit. When the average person's heart rate exceeds 150 beats per minute, their cognitive processing shuts off. That part that makes us human. Which means they cannot rationalize, they cannot problem solve, they cannot be dealt with in a rational manner because they're operating on what we call the puppy brain. Fight, flight, survival. So part of the role of de-escalation is to get that person to calm down and get their heart rate. And one of the worst things you can say to that individual is, please calm down. Because that's like pouring gasoline on a fire. We'll get into more specifics shortly. But when that individual, their face is flushed, you know, the pupils are constricted, and they're all tensed up, that's your cue that that heart rate is probably at that trip point. Nothing you say is going to penetrate. Arguing, trying to rationalize is going nowhere. As a security organization, we deal with this all too routinely, sometimes in more serious situations. And what we'll do, as long as it's safe, is we let them rant and rave. Because typically, within a few minutes, they run out of gas, especially if we're not pouring gasoline on that fire. And as they start to come down from that blood rate, heart rate high, now you can start having a conversation with them. And after, when they run out of gas, it's like, why aren't you arguing with me? Well, I'm listening to you, and I'm trying to hear what you're saying and understand your position. So physiological influences play a huge role. Be mindful of this where that person is in a very agitated state, because nothing you say is going to penetrate. Emotional influences, stress, anger, rage, temperament, and the list goes on. Everything fuels behavior. Environmental influences, chemical influence, the trustees of modern chemistry, as we like to refer to it. Tenuous realities, reactive attachment disorders. That's beyond the scope of the morning discussion here. We don't have the time. But just giving you an appreciation for the multitude of factors that will contribute to an individual's behavior. Most likely in the negative spectrum. Human desires and needs. More often than not, unless the person has a legitimate beef and they're willing to discuss it rationally, they're looking to get something for nothing. You smiled. Do you have an example you'd like to share?
Plenty of them.
Okay. Yeah, because they've learned from experience that if they make enough stink, that they're going to get what they want, just so they shut up. De-escalating behavior. It's the key point of what we're going to cover today. Verbal de-escalation is a tactic we use to gain control of the situation and to, even though we don't like to use the term, calm the person down. Okay? Did I borrow you?
Sure.
But watch the cable.
Oh, my goodness.
It's okay. She's probably a lovely lady, but she is in a royal hissy fit because she wasn't happy with her meal, the way it was prepared, how quickly it came out, yada, yada, yada. And she starts in with me because I happen to be the server or the closest person to her. What we have found to be very effective is for someone else in a position of authority to come in. Please stand and come over. I'm going to borrow you. To come in, I'll step away. You know, your first name?
Paul.
Hi, my name is Paul. Your name?
Angela.
Angela. I'm part of the issue that started the interaction. So I'm now removed. Paul is opening up a very gentle dialogue, introducing himself to her, she to him. You know, what can I help you with? That would be his question. My being removed, thank you very much, from that scenario is an immediate de-escalation. Because for whatever reason, she decided that I was going to be the receiver of her anger, angst, and displeasure. So there would be nothing I can do for the most part to deal with that effectively. So Paul comes up, I step away, introduces himself, asks her name, and starts a dialogue. Majority of cases, it's very effective. Yes, sir?
Do you recommend in that case you actually leave or you just step back?
I will start stepping back, and if I feel Paul needs backup, I will stay close hand. If it appears that Paul has everything under control, and things are calming down, I'll get out of eyesight. I'll still keep an eye on what's going on. But we've found it effective that the initial interaction where the angst started, remove that person, bring in a fresh person. Hi, my name is Paul, your name? How may I help you? What would you like? How can we make this right for you? We do not like to say or ask, what's the problem? And that's kind of a negative connotation. So you want to be in a helpful position for that individual. Now, qualification. If that individual is just being a cantankerous royal pain in the ass, it's not going to work. Digressing a little bit. Each of your establishments should have a sign welcoming your guests with a footnote reserving the right to refuse service to anyone. And underneath that, this is private property. The importance of that is this. If this problem is not going away, no matter what's being offered or any interaction, the next step is to politely ask the individual to leave. If the individual refuses to leave and you have that signage, she's now trespassing and she's subject to a misdemeanor arrest should you have the need to call 911. So if a situation is getting out of hand and you cannot satisfy the need, you cannot get the person to leave, it becomes a 911 call. Because failing to leave upon invitation leaves her in a trespass mode, and it's enforceable by law here in the Commonwealth. Try to read the body language of the individual. Now, this may be Paul's job with me off to the side. No. aside from being verbally aggressive and angry, are they posturing to be physically aggressive? At which point you want to stay out of arm's reach and do what you can through conversation to get that person to relax a little bit. Be careful on the words you use, because they're going to be overly sensitive to anything and everything you say, provided they're at a heart rate where they can actually hear and comprehend what it is that you're saying. Stand with strength and confidence, and try not to be intimidated. However, be prepared to go hands-on if it becomes an absolute necessity. If a confrontation, verbally or otherwise, aggressive movement starts with somebody else within your organization should be paying attention, and if it looks like it's getting heated, it's a 911 call. Believe me, the police would rather show up and it be a non-issue than have to come and deal with a major confrontation. We run into this all too frequently. Your approach, your body language, your positioning is critical. When someone is explaining their issue, whether it makes sense or not to you, listen, hear what they're saying, repeat it back to them. This tells the individual that you're not just listening, you're hearing, you're repeating back what they said so you can ask, am I understanding you correctly? That in itself is a very powerful de-escalation technique. Okay. Now, if that individual who is in their fit of anger or rage, the condition is being driven by alcohol or drugs in the recreational use, what do you think the chances are that you can actually penetrate any communication with that person?
Worse.
It's not going to go anywhere. Okay? Because they're in a total irrational state. The pulse rate is up, and in no way are they thinking objectively about what they're saying or what they're doing. You want to avoid hands-on at all costs unless it becomes necessary, but there's that 911 call. For those who may have larger facilities, Skip, I have a question for you. When was the last time you asked the Philadelphia police to come by, pay a visit to get to know your facility?
Haven't done so, although they've been here for a variety of other reasons.
Okay. When they're called here for a 911 call, they're coming in a heightened state, ready for trouble, looking to deal with a specific incident that is developed, correct? Okay. Contact the local precinct. This goes for any of your businesses that have square footage, and invite them in for a walkthrough so that they have a general idea of the layout of the building, entrances and exits. Because you could very well end up in an active shooter situation, and that could be extremely valuable information for them. If you have drawn floor plans that show alcoves, storage, entrances, exits, share it with them so they have that information available. This way they're not coming in blind as far as the layout of the physical facility. Because like on this floor alone, if there was an active shooter event, there are a lot of nook and crannies for that shooter to hide in when the police arrive. Let them know what they're walking into. When they're not in a heightened state responding to a call where they don't really know what they're going to have to deal with until they walk through the door. Okay? Safety mindset is key. Have other personnel in your organizations trained, even minimally, that if a situation develops between a guest and whomever, they pay attention, not to become directly involved, but to be ready to make that call, or if need be, render assistance. Now, what we've been seeing a great deal of in the area of recreational drug use overdose is a condition known as excited delirium syndrome. Anybody hear of it before? Okay. Typical with an overdose of a variety of cocktails, the individual gets into a zombie-like state. Their body temperature will exceed 109 degrees Fahrenheit. They are impervious to pain. If you tase them, they just pull the wires up. It has no effect. Pepper spray, mace, no effect on them. If they get their hands on you, if they don't severely hurt you, they're going to kill you. And you'll see it because it's an ultimate manic state. The American Journal of Psychiatric Nursing for inpatient treatment recommends that if a patient enters excited delirium, a minimum of 6 adults will be required to subdue that person. There was one case where a 14-year-old girl went into excited delirium. It took 5 adults to get her under control. They become super strong and impervious to pain. Now, the flip side of the coin is they usually drop dead of a heart attack within 10 minutes of entering that state because it's such a shock to the body. You want to give that person a lot of room. If you can get them out of the place, fine, but once that condition starts, their actions are totally unavailable. We see it at least once a month in the work that we do. Just be cognizant. Yes, sir?
So what do you recommend the best methods for that?
That's at night. If that person that I just described enters your facility or it happens while they're there, which typically is what happens, immediate 911 call. And tell them that not only the police, you're going to need advanced medical life support. You get the paramedics to show up as well.
But for the real time, you just give them space.
Just give them space and be prepared to use tables or chairs to block that individual from reaching others. This is where a lot of manpower, per se, is going to be needed. There's no easy way to deal with these individuals. There was a case up in South Whitehall Township, Lehigh County, a few years ago. A fellow went into excited delirium. He went out onto the highway, and he was tearing side view mirrors off cars. He was punching through windows. Totally bizarre behavior. The police officer showed up. He attacked the police officer. Officer shot and killed him in self-defense. It's a bad situation. I was able to see the tox results of the screening that was done. Check this cocktail. You have morphine, marijuana, cocaine, and methadone in his system. Right? His family, because they're at an amusement park, couldn't find him, so they went home to New Jersey, filed a missing persons report in New Jersey after leaving Pennsylvania. So people said, why did they go back to Jersey? Probably because their car was filled with the drugs. Right? Be mindful. And I'm sure you've seen enough individuals come into your respective businesses who were floating a little on the higher side. Give them room. Paul, may I borrow you again? I promise I won't bug you too much. Just stand here. Paul's facing me. Paul's angry about it. One of the first things you never do is back away. Backing away is a submission to his behavior. Now, if Paul gets in my face like this, it's not where I want to be, it's too close. So I will nonchalantly make eye contact, speak to Paul, and start moving to the side to give myself a little distance. If I've been able to notice whether or not he's right-handed or left-handed, I'll move to the weaker side. But I'm maintaining eye contact, I'm not staring him down. I'm prepared, of course I'm trained for this, to deal with it physically if it gets to that point, but I don't want to look threatened. I want to show that I'm centered. I have strength, but I'm not projecting it. And I'm listening and hearing what Paul's complaint is, what his issue. I'm repeating it back to make sure I understand, and forcing Paul then to repeat what I'm saying, to confirm what I'm saying. Thank you, Paul. And what's also very interesting is, from our experience, yours may end up being a little different, is when you ask the person, okay, what would you like? What can I do for you right now that will make things right for you? Many times they have no answer. We just fly off the handle. We see that a lot, I'm sure you do as well. But when you ask them, what would you like? What would you recommend to resolve your issue or satisfy the matter? They haven't thought that far ahead. These can be very effective techniques. Peer support. If I'm having that conversation with Paul and I'm maneuvering to be in a little safer position, I'm sorry, your first name again?
Angela.
Angela, I thought it was. Angela may come over to provide a little peer support, a little backup, being prepared to interject if need be with me, but not to appear threatening. And I see Angela taking copious notes over here. I did provide a PDF to Mark of the entire outline of slides. Did you receive it? Okay. Follow up with Mark and ask him to send you a copy, because it'll show all of the slides from today's presentation and discussion, which you then can use to review, to share with your personnel, and the like. Your job is to avoid a rigid personality. Your job is to get that rigid personality to relax. Do not tell them to calm down. Do not tell them to please relax. Whatever they're looking for, whatever they're saying, may be totally irrelevant, ridiculous, and no merit. But whether it's a legitimate thing in their mind or they're just being difficult, listen, hear, and try to get them to break their rigidity. Communication. Concrete thinkers have something etched in their mind in stone, and it's not going to change. You have to be able to recognize this early on and move beyond it. Listen, repeat, ask them to repeat. The primary goal of de-escalation is to A, avoid a problem, B, to get them into conversation with you, pursuing a solution to whatever their perceived problem would be. Stubborn refusals. Let's go back to that middle school student. The entire semester, because this program was produced and delivered towards the end of the semester, this young man drove the teacher nuts. What complicated it further and gave me the inside look to the fact that he wanted something is when she spoke to his other teachers, they had no problems with him. So what was it about this class, this teacher? Was it her? Was it somebody else in the class? Was it the environment? After she learned that he wanted his desk by the window and she moved it and the bad behavior went away, she went back to his other teachers and asked, where does he sit in the classroom? Every one of them had him by the window. So that was his driving motivation. Because in his home life, undoubtedly, the only way he had anybody pay attention to him or he obtained what he needed or wanted was through outwardly troublesome, annoying behavior. I'm sure all of us at one point in time when we were kids made enough of a fuss that mom and dad just said, "Here, now shut up." His situation was undoubtedly significantly more extreme. Repetitive demands basically means they really don't want a solution. They just want to cause a problem. That's where you politely invite them to leave. You ask them once, you ask them twice. Try to escort them out. If they do not move, it's 911. Yes, sir.
I asked you, how would you go about
Doing what?
like trying to give them the lead and escort them out?
All right. First of all, you don't want to touch them because they can consider it an aggressive act. But try to get them to leave voluntarily. If they refuse, they're now legally trespassing, subject to arrest under law, 911.
All right, question, but like how can you argue them? I'm asking more to like tip to help get them out without saying, oh, you're trespassing, that can just...
No, you don't want to say that to them.
Alright, so help me do it.
No, I would not. See, that would only infuriate the door. Say, listen, you're now trespassing, we're going to call the police. We do not recommend that in any way, shape, or form. You want to try to escort them out without touching them. They may be compliant, they may not. If they leave, so be it. If not, 911. But once they leave, have somebody kind of take a peek at where they are, what they're doing, if they actually leave or they're hanging around outside. What I can tell you again from experience, to be right with you, there's no guaranteed silver bullet. Every case is unique, and you're going to have to use your best wits about you to try to work through the solution to put an end to it. So,
At what point would you recommend to just like introduce?
I'll make it simple. If Paul lays a hand on me, and I interpret it to be an aggressive move, Paul may have arm again, you just might be plenty this time. Not stand over there. Okay. I'm talking to Paul. Now I want you to reach out and grab my arm hard. He grabs my arm. That's assault. Okay? He's not going to expect it. But in about a second or less after he grabs my arm, he's going to be on the floor. If a person touches you, my recommendation would be, let's get you back. Grab my arm. Would be, hold on. Would you please let go? If he refuses or becomes more aggressive, in my role, he's going down. In your role, you want to try to get him out the door, 911. If he continues to put hands on you, male or female, a couple of really basic moves that will take anybody down. I don't care how big they are. All right? The knees, the family jewels. And even for women, that's a very tender, sensitive area. So a good knee or kick to the groin area is going to get them doubled over.
Is that a proven fact?
Pardon?
That's a real big happens.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I can tell you from firsthand experience.
Okay, that's why I was pretty open.
Right? Not as sensitive as yours, I don't think, but it's still sensitive enough that it's going to be.
Yeah, I don't think it's equal, but that's
Okay. Now, if Jeff, grab my throat. Both hands. All right. No matter where somebody grabs you, they are giving you a gift of retaliation. Okay? Here, he may have me by the throat. Look what I can do. Boom. He's vulnerable. I can also come up on the inside and come down and break both his collarbones. Or, if I deem it appropriate, heel strike right here will bust his nose and leave him totally bloody. And so there are options if somebody gets aggressively hands-on with you. Primary goal is to try to make sure that does not happen. Sir, have I answered your question? Yes.
I think I just feel like I've had some experience in bars for years. I always feel like the best way to make people feel calm, and some of the situations I've been in was just ask them to talk to me personally, like outside, to follow me outside, not to have a fight, but
that works. That's an excellent point. 1 second. And as you're doing that, would you like a cup of coffee? Would you like something to drink? Let's step outside away from all this madness and have a conversation about it. Excellent de-escalation technique.
I'll say on that same note, a lot of the bars and stuff that we work at are very loud. So it's a very easy conversation to have. Like, man, I want to listen to you. I want to hear everything you say, but it's very loud. Like, can we just go outside?
I want to listen. I want to hear. I want to provide a solution to the issue you're facing. So let's step outside.
And then they're outside before they even knew they were being asked.
Right. Have someone else from your team come out with you. Just peer support, back up if needed. Okay? Now, my team and I are always armed. There are occasions where we have tasers, depending upon the assignment or why we've been called in. We avoid hands-on contact at all costs. Because even if an aggressive individual does not have a weapon, should they go hands-on with us or we go on hands-on with them, the weapons come into play. So that's something we always avoid. In our line of work, about 5 years ago, we went to tasers. Best decision we ever made. Because we have more compliance when the taser comes out, if need be, than anything else. Because they know we won't hesitate to use the tasers. And stun guns, stunners are legal here in Pennsylvania. Try to be the eye of the storm. It's noisy in here. Let's go outside and have a conversation. Great points. Angela, you have a question?
No.
You mean you have no questions of anything we've covered?
Not yet.
Okay. Unusual, intense, eccentric communication. The rigid personality, concrete thinkers, we touched on that. I think I just went backwards in time. I did, okay. Divide and conquer. I started with this. Okay? I'm in a verbal discussion with Angela. I'm trying to de-escalate. It's not working. Paul steps in, introduces himself. I mosey away. Angela introduces herself. Okay? That's a divide and conquer. Change the issue. Pay attention to the strategies used by the people that you're having to contend with. Because some of them are very adept at being problems in your places of business, primarily to get what they want, or they just had a bad day and decided to take it out on your staff. Tactical and safety considerations. positioning, working with your staff, basic self-defense moves. Anything you do, if it comes to being hands-on, you want to be perceived as defensive, not offensive. Now, let's say Paul goes hands-on with me, and I take him down to the floor with 1 or 2 hits. I don't continue pummeling him. He's down. I'll take a step or 2 back to determine whether he's going to be compliant or get up and want to continue with the altercation, which might not be a good decision on his part. But anyway. Recognizing patterns of anger. Do you have many clients, many guests who come on a regular basis that you get to know? Or is there a constant turnover, very few new faces, or very few regular faces? Okay. This gets back to that behavioral baseline that I talked about when I first started speaking, is get to know your regulars, develop that behavior baseline, what to expect when they come through the door. And if one of those individuals has had a bad day, you're going to pick it up very quickly, because it's going to show. I mean, we all have bad days. They usually don't last long. We get over it, we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and we continue on. If you have a regular and that bad day seems to be more than a day or 2, many times it's something going on in their personal life. We receive calls many times from employers. We have a problem employee and we don't know what to do about it. We don't know how to handle it. Well, more frequently than not, it's really not a problem employee. It's an employee who has had a problem at home, money-wise, something outside of work that has reached a point that it's not showing up in the behavior at work. It could be one of your employees, maybe one of the guests visiting your facility. If it's somebody you've come to know, have a conversation with them. Be the Dutch uncle or the Dutch aunt. Preemptive Deescalation. What do you think I mean by that, Paul? Preemptive Deescalation.
Try to do judge situations before they develop.
Identify a potential situation before it develops. It boils down to paying attention to everybody who comes through the door, whether they're sitting at the bar or sitting at a table in the dining room, or even for takeout. What is the demeanor? Are they coming in calm and collected? Are they coming in agitated? If they're coming in agitated, you want to pay attention and maybe take the opportunity to say, welcome, thank you for stopping in. Especially if there's a line or you're busy, what would you like? Is there something I can help you with while you're waiting for the staff? Because that person may develop into a problem, or you'll have an opportunity to sort of calm things down before it gets to that point. Because if they're agitated coming through the door and their beer is warm or the food is served cold, that could just be the trigger that sets them off when it's really not a big deal. Pretty much covered physical organization. Rate, tone, pitch, and volume of your voice. Very important. The more wound up an individual becomes, emotionally, with aggression, anger, or rage, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, the voice gets louder, the pitch may get louder, they'll speak faster, rate, tone, pitch, and volume. Your goal in your communication with them is to maintain a normal, even conversational tone. Because that's adrenaline driving their voice. The rate, tone, pitch, and volume of the voice will also be your clue as to where that heart rate may be on the scale. And your calm voice, listening, hearing, repeating, may be just what's necessary to bring it down. Anger covers a very broad spectrum. Develop your essential strategies. Again, follow up with Mark. We'll send you a PDF of this entire outline, it's 60 slides. Review it with your staff periodically, and develop your techniques. It's not going to be perfect right out of the gate, but you'll be better prepared to deal with that aberrant adult or whomever that comes through the door. Chaotic rage, any kind of rage, will prelude aggressive behavior. What I mentioned earlier about the puppy brain, it's not to be discounted. When that heart rate peaks 150, working on that little midbrain. It's fight, flight, survive. Not comprehend anything you're trying to do. So your calm voice, your non-threatening presence, standing in strength and with confidence and centering, listening and hearing and repeating, even though it may not be penetrating, your voice can actually bring that person down to the point where, yes, you can connect with them at an intellectual level.
What's hot rage? Higher than chaotic rage?
Hot rage is usually somebody who just blows up. Because you asked about hot rage, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. It runs the spectrum. Again, it's beyond today's coverage. But the bottom line is rage is rage. None of which is easy to deal with. I'm sure you've seen it.
I just know it's strength of the
When you get into the physiological, psychological, and sociological aspects of it, I mean, you've got an A to Z spectrum to define elements of rage. Again, well beyond what we need to talk about here, other than recognizing when someone goes into a fit of rage, whether they feel it's, in their mind, it's justified. Whether you think it's justified or not, is to do your damnedest to not expose others to injury and to gain control of the situation. Get that individual, male or female, out of the rage. Your voice carries a lot of weight in that category. Listening, hearing, repeating back, being sensitive, showing a little empathy. You don't want to feel or show vulnerability. Like I said not long ago, there's no silver bullet. There's no two instances that are going to be the same. After today's program and luncheon, reflect back on some of these situations that you did deal with, what worked, what didn't work, what might have set the individual off, what actions were taken by yourself or one of your team members, and incorporate that into your training. If you have meetings with your staff periodically, cover this. Cover some of the points. It'll go a long way. Calm the person, but do not say calm down. A local gym that I frequent, I happen to be working on an ab machine. Their cardio deck is on an upper level, and there's this gentleman on a treadmill at the extreme end of the balcony where he could basically see everything that's going on. He's up there doing his thing. Carlos, who's the personal training director, is talking to a young lady who apparently came in wanting to know about or join the club. Carlos turns around and points up to the cardio deck. And I can see he's talking to her. Well, the guy up on the treadmill sees Carlos pointing up, and he yells down, "What the F are you looking at?" Now, what Carlos should have done, which he did not, was say, "My apologies, I'm just showing this young lady the cardio deck." He decides to get into a verbal discussion with the guy. "I'm not pointing at you. What's your problem?" It's like, here we go. For close to 10 minutes, this went back and forth. All I could say, the guy stopped the treadmill, and he's hanging over the rail. If he was down on the lower level, I think he would have attacked Carlos. Where Carlos should have just let it go, he decided to get into a verbal altercation with the guy. And for 10 minutes, they're yelling and screaming back and forth at each other. And I'm watching this and saying, God help them. Now, let's talk a little bit about the guy up on the treadmill. Why is he so sensitive to somebody looking up at him? What's going on in his life? Is he that insecure? I'm sure a lot of the people who come into your places fall into that category. That if you look at them, what are you looking at? Why are you looking at me? I see someone here chuckling. You have something you could share? Oh, I thought you were laughing. Like you had something to share. Drives the point home. Do your damnedest not to put gasoline on fire. Only blows up. Motivate the other individual to have a conversation with you. To sit down. To step outside where it's not so noisy so we can talk. Don't do it alone. Have somebody with you. Mentioned about empathizing with the other person, being sensitive. You're not necessarily going to agree, but you're going to work towards a resolution. Ask for choices, offer choices. And I think you see it shaping out. You want to do everything you can to establish a dialogue with the individual. Because conversation in the proper tone will de-escalate the majority of situations quickly and easily. Setting limits. Now, if a person becomes extremely vulgar and nasty, it would be appropriate to say, "Excuse me, I'm more than willing to listen to you, hear what you're saying, work to a resolution that you'll be satisfied with, but can we kind of put a cap on some of this language? Because I get it, but we don't need it." It reminds me from a line from a movie I saw once where someone said, "If you remove the colorful metaphors from the vocabulary of most people in this room, they wouldn't be able to put together a cohesive sentence." And it's like every second or third word is a colorful metaphor. Take it out of their vocabulary and they can't speak. Some people have just learned that that's acceptable. Lines of communications, all we've been talking about. Get them to talk, get them to listen to you. With no barriers. Okay? Barrier can be taken negatively by somebody. You want to be close to a defensive barrier if you need it, but don't block somebody off. Case in point. We talk about taking somebody outside for a conversation because the bar or the facility is noisy. We learned about this after the fact that the manager stepped out with the individual. They were willing to step outside. Somebody inside thought it would be appropriate to bolt the door. And the guy heard it, and it set him off. Little things to make a bad situation worse. It was done with good intentions, but perceived like, you're locking me out? Your job, as challenging as it may be, is, when Paul steps in to intervene in the verbal confrontation that I'm having with Angela, is to not prejudge what's going on. Because if you try to determine in advance and prejudge it, you're walking in with a bias. Paul needs to walk in with an open mind. Hi, my name is Paul. Your name, Angela. Okay, I'm sliding away. You start a conversation. Even though you know what may have triggered it, don't bring that into the discussion right away. Listen actively. Don't shut out the individual. Criticizing or name calling, that just puts gasoline on the fire. Power struggles. It never works. Nothing threatening. That's why we say, if it becomes necessary to dial 911 because they're now trespassing, they failed to leave, you do not tell them, we're calling the police, you're trespassing, you're subject to arrest, so please leave. That's threatening. That backfires. Don't minimize the issue. Do not argue the issue. As irrational and unrealistic it may be to you, for the majority of individuals, other than the average adult, who just likes to be a problem, in their mind the problem is real. In your mind, it's like it's ridiculous. Get them to talk about it. Telling them it's not real, telling them it's nonsense, is not a solution. We've covered this many times today. I want to help you, but I need you to tell me what the issue is. And so on and so forth. Three main listening skills. Physical, mental attention. Because you may be listening and hearing with your ears, but your eyes and your body are telling the individual you can't be bothered. Not a good sign to share. Eye contact, but not staring the person down. And active listening means you're listening. So, Paul, what takeaways do we have so far today from this?
Takeaway? I think it's important to certainly be aware of all the individuals that come in to your establishment, and to try to act early to prevent any seeming escalation situations.
Okay. Now, how many of you who have regular customers who come in, whether it's a bar or a restaurant or a pizzeria, take the time to have a little conversation with them, even if it's about the weather and the potholed streets, which I think took out the air dam on the front of my car this morning. Get to know them a little bit. Do you do that? Good.
I think for me, like, we have 3 different places, and it's important that everybody gets greeted. Saying hi, just if a server or bartender say hi to somebody, you get to have a sense of what their story is.
Yes. Say hi and make eye contact. And we'll show you how valuable that can be from an extreme position. One of the banks that we do work for, their tellers and their platform clerks are trained. No matter what you're doing, no matter how busy you may be with a customer, when someone walks through the door into the bank, you look at them say good morning, good afternoon, welcome, we'll be with you shortly. You're making eye contact. Everybody who walks through the door, no matter what they're doing. But one day, this guy walks through the door, and he's greeted as such. One of the clerks on the platform made eye contact with him, said good morning, blah, blah, blah. He went over to the counter where the deposit slips and paperwork is, and he fussed around for a few minutes, and then he left. An hour later, the bank receives notification that a different bank 2 blocks away was held up. And it was the guy who came into that branch. And apparently, because eye contact was made, he was greeted, it was face-to-face contact, he decided that maybe this wasn't the branch that he was going to hold up. He went to another bank, because when the photos were shown, yeah, he was in our bank. They look at the figures. That was just an hour before. So, in that case, it prevented a holdup. In your case, you could possibly just defuse somebody who just walks through the door. Get to know your clientele, even if it's just a brief conversation. Also, that tells them that you're approachable. That if there's something they're not pleased with, if there's something they have a problem with, they can come to you. Also, that behavioral baseline may warn you to something that could be totally out of place. One of our restaurant clients, it's a chain, they have 25 stores. 10 o'clock at night, a woman comes in on a Wednesday night with 3 young children, school-age children. And she sits in a booth by herself with the kids. A few minutes later, this guy comes in, sits down. And the manager thought it odd that this woman would be out 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday, school night, with 3 young children. The guy left, and about 10 minutes later, another guy came in and sat down. Now his radar's calls 911. He goes, I have a situation here at the restaurant that I think something is out of whack. And the police responded. What do you think I might have done? You'd like to take a guess? Close, but no. Nailed it. She was dealing drugs. She brought the kids with her as a distraction, and her customers were coming in 10 minutes, because by the time the police showed up, the third guy came in. She had a gun. She had previously been convicted of felonies. She had a satchel filled with her pharmacy. She was dealing drugs. What is the probability that a buy could go bad in that restaurant and put everybody at risk? Huge. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. Sure.
The probability drops. You brought the kids in there. You got 3 kids. You might try to really shoot around 3 kids. That's like the situation. Unless it's like a. I mean, unless if it was like a.
You never know. That's all.
He's at school, like let's say.
Okay. How much time? Okay. We've covered a lot of that. All right. I'm going to sound like a broken record. There's no silver bullet. But mindset prepared, a little training to your employees, your team, paying attention to the people who come into your businesses, getting to know the regulars, because the regulars who feel really at home could also be the first ones to go off if there's a problem You shook your head in agreement. Did you experience something like that? Right. So, paying attention, when feasible, early intervention, get to know your regulars, at least on a personal basis. And if you see a regular get pissed off by somebody who is also a regular or not, because you've established that rapport, that allows you to step in immediately, get the person, the regular, to say, what just happened? What can I do to help you? It's immediate diffusing of the situation. Find out what the real problem is, if there is a real problem. Sometimes in a loud, noisy, crowded bar at 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, somebody bumps into somebody the wrong way. They've had a good couple of drinks in them, anything is possible. Okay? So what's the basic concept we want to leave here with today?
I just feel like it's preparation.
Preparation. Okay. How large is your staff?
Usually like 3 or 4.
Okay. What are you going to bring back to them?
We gotta let them know. I think I like the baseline thing a lot. Actually, it's paying attention, just being people coming out of the door.
That in itself is huge. Behavioral baseline is going to be your first indicator of a potential problem. Okay. The woman with the 3 kids, the baseline was off because 10 o'clock at night with a restaurant that closes at 11, a woman coming in with 3 school-age children on a school night, and I was like, whoa, that's out of the norm. So the manager immediately started paying attention to what's going on. One guy came in, okay, not a big deal. He left. 10 minutes later, another guy comes in. Now it's like flags are up. And it didn't look right as things were being passed under the table. Get to know your people. Develop that baseline. And you'll see how powerful it is. Because you might have that regular coming in who's got a really bad day. You want to buy them a beer or just sit down and go, tough day? Get them to open up and talk and prevent a problem. Should something else interact with him or her, about once or twice a year he gets shot at. Right? I consider those bad days. Been shot twice. Thankfully, the ballistic vest took care of that. But observation skills, recognizing behavior that's out of character for the environment, for the time of day, for the clientele, the patrons that are coming to your businesses, will help you step in early to prevent a situation should you see it developing. Angela, questions, comments, clarification?
I work here and we do weddings, so I don't have like a regular baseline, but I guess my baseline is everyone's here to have a good time. So I think my primary place to keep an eye out would be probably the bar and people who are young and drinking heavily to celebrate.
Believe it or not, you can establish a baseline.
Yeah, there's
Because
a baseline. It's not a regular.
You have 30, 40, 50, 100 people coming in for a celebration. If you pay attention globally to all the people in the room, you'll also develop that baseline for the next group that comes through the door. Also, by doing so, you'll notice couples who have friction between them. If you pay attention, you'll see couples come in, especially in other establishments that are open more retail. Come through the door. You could tell when they're sitting at a table or a bar. Is the conversation pleasant, conversational, or is it tense? One of the things I like to recommend is take a favorite action movie or some movie that you've seen God knows how many times Watch it again, but turn the volume off. You're watching for body language. You're watching for emotional expression. Because you're going to know the scene, you're going to know the dialogue, but now you're looking to see the behavior aspect of what's going on. Once you've done that with a few films that you're familiar with, get a foreign film of a language you do not understand, and listen, watch the movie and listen to the rate, tone, pitch, and volume of voices that interact. And you will hear the tension, you will hear variations in that rate, tone, pitch, and volume when a person becomes stressed or the situation is becoming tense between two or more individuals. It's superior training to do. It takes a little patience, but you can be amazed what you will learn by doing so. Okay. Questions, comments, clarifications? A lot to digest, what do you say? How about you? Questions, comments?
The only thing I have a question about is if somebody puts their hands on you and you don't know any self-defense techniques and maybe you're not strong, like what is the move?
Paul, may I borrow you again? Grab my arm. Okay? Someone put their hands on you, and it's not overly aggressive, very politely. I'd appreciate if you wouldn't do that. Okay? If somebody grabs you because they want to throw you to the floor, okay? The one thing you have, thank you. Sure. One thing you have in your advantage is adrenaline. When that fight, flight, fear reflex kicks in, your strength will go from 0 to 10 that fast. And it'll come down just as fast. So for about 45 to 60 seconds, you're going to have superhuman strength beyond what you're accustomed to. Paul grabs me like that. He's extremely vulnerable. Guess where my knee is going? Okay? It's going right into his groin, which is going to cause him to double over. And then the second jab of my knee is going to be under his chin, and he's going to be out cold on the floor. And to demonstrate how powerful that can be, or we should say, use an example. Our father and his brother were overseas World War II in the Army. My grandmother, who stood 4'11", needed help lifting a 20-pound bag of potatoes. I wasn't even a blink in my father's eye at the time. Neighbor was working on his car. The jack slipped. He's pinned under the front of the car. He screams for help. My grandmother goes out. She picks up the car and he crawls out. 4'11", little Italian lady. The adrenaline in her system gave her sufficient strength that she was able to get enough weight off him that he can crawl out. So keep that in mind. But you have to keep in mind as well that it's only going to last 45 to 60 seconds. So get yourself some training. Now, for the ladies and now even the gents, there's a there's a program called RAD, R-A-D, Rape, Aggression, Defense, but it's evolved beyond that. It's 9 hours over 3 nights, 3 hours a night. It's for men, women, children, seniors. Basic self-defense moves. It's very effective. Look it up on Google. They offer teachers all over the United States. The one up in my area, Allentown, that teaches it, she's a second-degree black belt. Her daughter is a teen black belt. Her husband comes in with the big Gumby suit, and you get physical. You practice the techniques, and you learn what you can do. Because the goal is not to get into an ongoing confrontation. It's to be able to counter-assault and escape to avoid further injury. Rape, aggression, defense. It's a great, great program. Okay. Questions?
No, but I think it's a good analogy for really what you're trying to do with de-escalation. You're not really trying to convince them. You're really trying to, your win is to calm the situation, not end up being right.
Yeah.
So you throw as much fog at them as you possibly can, in as many different ways as you can, and get until they calm down and the situation goes away. That's the thing.
If you can't baffle with brilliance, you befuddle them with bullshit.
That's why you're here.
All right. Excellent point. Questions? Comments? Questions? Gentlemen? Okay. I think it took it pretty easy on me with questions and participation. Is there anyone here who doesn't quite get what I was trying to convey? I won't take it personally, but I will want to clarify it if I missed the mark anywhere. Okay. Follow up with Mark, get a copy of the outline. It's 60 slides. And this way you can review it and share it with your team, incorporate it into your regular meetings. It's not an expensive program, the RAD program, and it's a lot of fun because you can get physical. And like I said, no matter where somebody grabs you, they're giving you a gift. Paul, can I trouble you again? All right? If I grab Paul by the throat, look at everything here that's exposed. If Paul grabs me like this to control my arms, he's still vulnerable. But there's also a little technique I want to show you before we start wrapping up. Are you strong?
I guess so.
Okay. With your right hand or left hand?
Right hand.
Okay. I want you to grab my wrist, okay? And I want you to lock down as hard as you can. You're not going to hurt me. But I can't guarantee I'm not going to hurt you. You're relaxing your grip already. When somebody grabs you by the wrist, there's a technique we call answering the phone. Okay? Now I'm going to do this slowly so I don't rip his thumb out of its socket. But you got a good grip?
Okay.
Okay. See, he's putting his body weight into it. Okay. Now, okay. Because he's not going to be ready for it, but because he's walking out, he's ready. He wants to save his thumb. Relax your grip just. I say let go. Come on. All right. More often than not, because they're not going to expect this, if you snap your wrist up fast and hard, okay, the thumb, no, you don't have to do, get back in there, okay? The thumb is the weakest joint in the hand. So if I snap up, two things are going to happen. Let's do that again. Slow motion. I snap up and, what should I go for?
I don't even know. I thought we were doing it.
I snap up and step back, I'm pulling him off balance. Now he's expecting this, so he's latched down. All right, you can let go now. But it's effective. Because the person who grabs you by the wrist out of frustration to control you is not going to expect that maneuver. All right? And believe me, you're going to break free. And more often than not, you're going to dislocate their thumbs. Okay? Which is not going to be a pleasant experience.
But that's not going to work on everyone. Like, just to say like that. And I get the procedure that you're trying to impress on her, but that's not going to work on people that are like going through that excited delirium, or something that's stuff like
If someone's in excited delirium, you don't want to touch them.
Right.
You don't want them to touch you.
But if someone is double her size, she's not going to be able to snatch their wrist back. I mean, she can try.
It's not the wrist, it's the thumb. Okay?
Like, okay.
Now, Paul grabbed me further up on my forearm, which could happen. But again, element of surprise. Somebody grabs that young lady's wrists. They're going to think they have control. And if she does a fast, jerky movement up, okay, the likelihood, even against you, of popping your thumbs out of their joints is relatively high, because you're not expecting it.
Isn't that like a high fail, like high reward? Because if she doesn't do that correctly, now I'm just closer to her.
Right. Let's say she does try to do the answer the phone maneuver, and it's not working. She's already pulling the person off balance a little bit. Boom. The knee comes up. See, this is where the RAD training comes into tremendous benefit, is you learn the options. Okay? And when you've learned the options and you've practiced them sufficiently, it becomes second nature. I'll use an example. Apples and oranges, what drives the going home. Whether it's on one of the side streets in Philly or 676 or any other road, you're driving along, doing the speed limit, you've got a red light, a green light, somebody blows through the red light on the stop sign. You go from the accelerator to the brake in a microsecond, and if need be, you're steering the vehicle to avoid the collision. And you've done it with no conscious thought. Because if you had to think about what to do, you'd be too late. How did you get that fast? We've all had it. We've all had the experience. Thousands of miles, thousands of hours of driving stop-and-go traffic, mechanical perfection, accelerator to brake, brake to accelerator, situational awareness, allowed you to recognize the danger at a subconscious level and respond without having to think about it. Because if you had to think about it, you'd have a new hood order. The RAD training, other training, developing your awareness of these techniques, basic self-defense, will get you to that same mindset. Does that make sense to you?
Partially, like I do understand that, but in the same sense, it's just like, I don't want people to leave here like de-evolving with the attack. Like if she's up against someone that has training, then that may work or may not.
The goal is to de-escalate using verbal techniques, conversation, avoiding physical contact at all costs, unless you're forced into a situation where you have no choice. Okay? We carry sidearms every day. It is the tool of last resort in our portfolio. It's the last thing we use, only when necessary. That's what we're teaching here. To avoid physical contact at all costs unless you are forced into a situation where you have no choice. Okay? Does that clarify it for you? All right. I do believe our lunch is ready. So why don't we wrap up here? If you would like to eat, I'll be around. I'll put tables. We'll carry on some conversation, and we'll go from there.
So before we break to eat, just a couple of logistical things. I forgot to mention this before the program, but the bathrooms are directly behind you in that hallway. If you go straight out this entrance here, turn to your left, you will see them right there. Before we break to eat, everybody give Diana a round of applause. Thank you for that. And give yourselves a round of applause for your participation. We really appreciate you guys. I would like to thank Skip and the rest of the staff here at Front and Palmer, Feast Your Eyes Catering. And the wonderful food we are about to taste. And with that, I'm done. Go ahead and eat.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Adam Mark. Good to see you. Oh, what a morning. Bookkeeper has the check, so but thank you.
I left out the time at 8 o'clock.